During the brutal winters of World War II, frostbite was feared more than enemy fire. On the frozen fronts of Stalingrad, Karelia, and the Ardennes, temperatures plunged so low that boots stiffened solid overnight. Soldiers woke to blackened toes, unable to walk, fight, or even stand watch. The cold, relentless and merciless, was claiming more lives than bullets ever could. But not every army met the same fate. Hidden in the chaos of the front lines, a handful of soldiers and field engineers discovered a remarkably simple trick, one that quietly saved thousands from amputation. It wasn't high-tech equipment or military funding. It was an ingenious adaptation called the boot liner trick, and once you understand it, you'll see why it remains one of the smartest cold-weather survival lessons ever devised. For anyone who's studied the war, it is clear that the deadliest weapon on the Eastern Front wasn't the rifle. It was exposure. Frostbite crippled entire divisions. At Stalingrad alone, more than 100,000 German soldiers were treated for cold injuries before the Soviet counteroffensive even began. In Finland, Norway, and across the Russian plains, troops from every side learned the same hard truth. Leather boots might stop a bullet, but they couldn't stop the cold. The real enemy wasn't the temperature, it was moisture. Soldiers' feet would sweat as they marched, soaking their socks from the inside. Then, when they stopped to rest, that trapped moisture froze. A thin film of ice formed between the foot and the boot, draining heat faster than bare skin against snow. The tougher the boot, the worse the problem became. By the winter of 1941, the Finnish army had found a solution that would later be studied and copied by both Germans and Soviets. A dual-layer boot system, built around removable felt liners. Each boot had an inner sleeve made of dense wool or reindeer hair. The liner could be taken out, dried, and swapped, keeping moisture from ever freezing inside the boot. Soldiers carried multiple pairs, one to wear, one to dry near the fire, and one as backup. The outer shell stayed stiff and protective, but the inner layer stayed warm and dry, even in temperatures below -40 degrees. The Red Army quickly adopted the idea, producing Valenki boots with thick felt liners for Siberian troops. The Germans, lacking materials, improvised with layers of straw, newspaper, or rags, a crude version of the same principle. Later, American engineers refined it into the famous Mickey Mouse boots of the Korean War, insulated, air-filled, and inspired directly by Finland's wartime innovation. Across all armies, the core method was the same. Start with a thin, moisture-wicking sock to pull sweat away from the skin. Layer a thick wool sock for insulation, then insert a removable liner that could breathe and be dried out. Soldiers would remove and shake their liners during long marches, or hang them near fires at night to steam out the ice. Finnish ski troops went a step further, packing dried moss or straw inside their liners to absorb sweat and boost airflow. Crude, yes, but incredibly effective. As supplies dwindled, German soldiers stuffed boots with hay to stay alive. Others carried small squares of wool to replace when wet, miniature sponge system that extended liner life and kept frostbite at bay. The genius of the boot liner trick wasn't magic, it was physics. It managed thermal regulation and moisture control. When sweat evaporates, it steals heat from the body. But by isolating that moisture in a removable layer, soldiers stopped it from freezing against their skin. Wool and felt, both naturally water-resistant and breathable, trapped tiny air pockets that held warmth even when damp. In fact, wool retains up to 80% of its insulation when wet, something modern synthetics still struggle to match. Wool also contains lanolin, a natural wax that repels water and resists bacteria. This meant soldiers could go weeks without washing their liners, yet still keep their feet functional. With discipline and rotation, a man could march indefinitely through sub-zero conditions, all without losing a single toe. For today's survivalists, hikers, and anyone facing harsh winters, this lesson still stands. Modern waterproof boots can be improved the same way, by adding wool or felt inserts that can be removed and dried. Always carry spare liners or thick socks and swap them daily. In emergencies, even wrapping your feet in dry grass, paper, or cloth inside your boots can recreate the same insulating gap that saves so many lives in freezing weather. Thickness doesn't matter as much as ventilation and dryness. Never let moisture sit against your skin. If you build your own liners from dense wool or felt, you'll find they mold to your feet, dry quickly, and offer warmth that rivals the best modern gear. Just as it did for soldiers trudging through Karelia's forests or Norway's mountains 8 decades ago. The World War II boot liner trick wasn't a luxury. It was survival born of necessity. It worked because it respected the laws of heat, moisture, and endurance. Those who mastered it walked out of blizzards alive. Those who didn't walk out at all. If you found value in this piece of forgotten wartime ingenuity, subscribe to In the Beginning for more deep dives into the survival technologies and human resilience that shaped history. As harshest moments, share it with anyone who appreciates the simple, timeless wisdom that kept generations alive when the world was frozen and the odds were impossible.